Done. Well, good evening. Welcome to the North Star tasting. Tonight we have got Scott Farrow with us from Wonderland Drinks, who's the Australian importer of North Star spirits. Scott's been doing this for many years now, and we've seen some cracking bottles come in from North Star. I'm not sure if everybody's been following the sort of North Star independently bottled movement, but some of the whiskies have been great. And I really enjoyed bringing them in, writing them up, tasting some of them, and sort of sharing some of these spirits with everyone. Because not only is the liquid inside the bottles pretty good, the names are good, the creation of them is good. I think with these bottles, I'm not sure if everybody's actually purchased a North Star or seen a bottle, but the information on the bottle is just superb. Like, you got cask series, there's when it was distilled, whether it was unchilled, filtered or coloured. There's also everything about the casks that are used on the bottle. It tells you as well, they are tasting notes from what they got when they tasted the whiskey, and then obviously when it was bottled. So lots of information in the bottle, and just lovely labels, like really. I probably picked the wrong one to say big and bold label, but things like that, you know, like just lots of colour, lots of really good modern fonts and graphic on it, and they've done really well in regards to bringing out something a little modern. And there's no packaging with it as well, so obviously in this day and age, good for the environment, which is fantastic. Where Scott and I are pretty much going to just talk back and forward tonight about the whiskey, but right now I'm going to hand you over to Scott, and he can tell us a little bit about North Star and perhaps Ian Croucher, and a bit about himself, and then hopefully we'll get stuck into the first whiskey pretty quickly. So take it away, Scott. Thanks.
Thanks, Craig. Evening, everybody, and welcome. I've met you before. Good to see you. If I haven't, nice to meet you. And also the same with North Star whiskey. If you've had a North Star tasting before, then hopefully I won't go over too much old ground, but I'll give you a little bit of a background to North Star, the brand. Ian Croucher, who's the owner of the brand, sort of where he's come from. We used to focus a lot on where he's come from, but now we're starting to talk about where he's going to as well. In 5 years, so North Star's been going for just over 5 years now, and it's been a super exciting brand to work with, because Ian is he was in the whiskey industry for many years, working for a company, AD Rattray. He was their global sales guy, and he was, I think, by all accounts, pretty good at selling whiskey. And about 6 years ago, or probably a little bit more than that, he decided that he wanted to do more than just be selling whiskey for somebody else. He wanted to do something himself, and he started to formulate the idea of making a brand, creating a brand, and finding whiskey that was accessible, and making something a little bit left of center, a little bit sort of newish, probably appealed to a younger or a more creative sort of thinking crowd of drinkers, because he'd always been enamored with whiskey, but found it quite inaccessible. Both in a couple of ways, I guess. One was a lot of the people that held the knowledge, he didn't feel like he was part of that group, and also the cost of some of the whiskey that he really wanted to, drink or buy for friends was often unaffordable. So he set about with the idea of finding whiskey and making it as financially accessible to people, but also accessible in the sense of how he communicated what his whiskey was that he was bottling. And as Craig mentioned earlier, I think if you've ever had a North Star bottle of whiskey in your hands, And if you haven't before, you'll get a chance tonight to purchase some. But you'll notice that on his bottles, there's just like every bit of information that you could possibly really almost ask for in terms of saying, well, what is this? Where's it come from? Was it finished? Is it straight from the cask? Has it been finished? How many bottles was in the outturn? What does it taste like? All that sort of stuff is on the bottle. Ian's quite renowned for his tasting notes that are sometimes very poetic, and sometimes it seemed like he was either had a few by the time he was writing them, or he was just in a rush. And I think what we'll do tonight is, and I hope you've all got the first one in your hand at the moment while I'm just chatting away, the Secret Space Side. But what I'll do is I'll read out to you, the tasting notes that are. This is the one that we're starting with, Secret Space Side. I'll read out the tasting notes that he puts on the bottles, and you'll quickly understand what I mean by those comments. But this is series number 17 for Ian, and he generally releases between 3 and 4 series a year, but he also has released along the way quite a number of really interesting blended whiskies. So either blended malts through his Vega series, which has been pretty popular. He's done everything from 20-year-olds to 41-year-olds in that range. And then his Spiker or Speaker series, which is blended Scotch, so grain and malt. And he's done everything from 20-year-olds to 40-year-olds and that. So some really, really sort of putting it out there with some of the whiskies he's released, because I think blended malts from independent bottlers and grain and malt blends from independent bottlers haven't always been well received by the market. Not because they're not good whiskies. It's just that there's a lot. Quite often there's been this whole it's blended. It's not single malt, so therefore it's not as good as a single malt, which is really odd considering the way whiskey has gone from being highly prized as a blend to now it's all about single malts. But he's garnered a huge amount of kudos and following by releasing those sorts of whiskies. In fact, the start of his entire whiskey journey happened because he's a bit of a chancer, is Ian. Lovely bloke, really friendly, easy to get along with, but he's a bit of a chancer, and his entire whiskey business basically hinged on his very first deal. And his very first deal that he ever did was with Edrington. And when he first started out, he went along, and AD Rattray was owned by Morrison's, and Mr. Morrison of Beaumont fame. He went to Mr. Morrison. Mr. Morrison, this is what I'm looking to do. Could you help me out with some introductions? And he said, well, Ian, how serious are you? And he said, oh, I'm very serious. He said, okay, well, I'll make you your first introduction to who you can potentially buy whiskey off. But you can't muck this up. And he went, and he tells the story that he went into Edrington, and he sat in the room of whatever general manager or whoever it was that does the deals, and they're sort of, well, okay, welcome, Ian. So we hear you want to buy some whiskey. How serious are you? Oh, I'm very, very serious. And they said, oh, okay, well, we've got a parcel of whiskey here which we'd like to offer to you. And it was the equivalent of about 200,000 bottles worth of liquid. And they said to him, oh, well, here's this parcel. And he didn't know at the time whether that was a test or what it was, but he just sat there and said yes. And then left the office, jumped in his car, rang his wife and said, I've just done my first whiskey deal. We've got no money. I've bought 200,000 bottles. I've got no idea how we're going to pay for this. I don't know where to sell it I've got no idea. And she just said, oh my God, what have you done, Ian? And he thought in that very moment, because he just said he just went white. His brain froze. He didn't know what he was agreeing to, but he thought he just had to wear the big pants and say yes. Anyway, he said that he sat in the car and started dialing all the people that he'd had global relationships with over the years of working with AD Rattray. And he managed to find enough customers in that time, just sitting in his car in the car park at Edrington. He found enough customers to commit to enough of the stock for him to go home to his wife and say, it's okay, we haven't lost the house. And that was the start of his business. And that has kind of been, you know, that's he's no dummy, but that's, I guess, a little bit of the way Ian rolls. You know, he rolls from crazy idea to crazy idea, but they seem to work for him mostly. While I'm telling you all these stories, we're drinking a Secret Speyside at the moment, and it's a 10-year-old, 43.2%. Bottled from a refill Oloroso butt and finished in 2 fresh Oloroso hogsheads. Does anyone care to sort of tell me what they're like? It's a really low ABV for a 10-year-old whiskey, 43.2%. What they think that might bring it down to that, if you weren't adding water. I mean, obviously adding water is going to be one of the reasons. But anyone got any other ideas? Come on, there's got to be some whiskey brains here, Simon.
So did he add it, maybe put in something a bit older? One of the casks was a bit older and it dropped.
Yeah. I would suggest that this particular bottling, and Ian's a very honest fellow. He actually got pulled up by the industry a little while ago, because in the first few years of him out and about, and you know, he was just telling everybody everything. He just thought, I'm just going to tell the truth about everything. And then I think some of the industry sort of pulled him aside and said, could you maybe ease up a little bit on the truth? Because we don't want that to get in the way of a good story. But Ian has always been honest, and even though he's restrained from saying things like exactly where this bottling came from, it wasn't hard to sort of draw a circle around a particular distillery. Anyone care to guess what they might think it is?
We've had Glenfarclas already.
Glenfarclas, yeah, right.
Oh, that was a good call.
Yeah, Glenfarclas. I had someone the other day said Macallan. I said, that's no way, that's Macallan. I don't know why. It was someone I thought knew something, but
Glenrothes, maybe.
Yeah,
got a real orangey note.
Yeah. It's look. You know, you'd be about 96.3% correct, probably, saying Glenrothes. Look, at the end of the day, Ian has a very strong relationship with Edrington, and I think when you're starting to dissect what it might be that Ian, I mean, there's a lot of secrets of this and secrets of that out. It seems to be more and more secret this, secret that. Out and about these days. I don't know if it's just that I'm focusing more on it, but is anyone else seeing the market sort of coming out more, less distilleries wanting to see their names out there, or is it just more of the same from two particular distilleries? Or I don't know. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of that sort of thing, but I think you'd be about 92.3% correct, Simon, if you said Glenrothes, but. But you know, look, I think you know, it's a really tasty little drinker for the price point. His tasting notes: stewed apples and pears and sugar-coated pastry on the nose. Palate: sweet white pepper, peanut butter and bramble jelly, and finished light sherry, perfect wood, big finish. I don't know about the big finish, but yeah. And it was also something that I thought was interesting that, he's bottled it from a refill, and then finished in 2 fresh Oloroso hogsheads. So he's obviously felt the need to freshen it up a bit. So the butt, 660 bottles out of that, but he's saying 1 refill butt and then finished in Oloroso hogsheads. So that's, yeah, I'm not sure what to make of that. I mean, that's one of those things where he might lead me to a certain amount of information, but after that, it's down to, well, what does it taste like? Are you enjoying the taste of the whiskey? Because that's what he ultimately aims for, is the pleasure of the drink. What's natural cask strength still, I assume. I haven't asked him, and because it's been because it's not bottled off straight out of a single cask, I'm not going to assume that it is natural cask strength. I'm going to assume that potentially there was a hot butt, and he may have tempered it a little bit. I will ask him at some point, but I've asked him before I've had some samples before when it was a really low ABV, and he said, Scott, that's how I received it. I've got no idea if anything happened to it before I purchased. I mean, one of the things with independent bottlers is quite often, especially these days, and it doesn't matter who you're talking to, whether it be, top of the tree, sort of Adelphi, even Adelphi these days are saying once upon a time they were having casks put in front of them, 6 a day sort of thing, samples from casks, people saying, oh, would you buy this? Would you buy that? I mean, they're in the same boat as everyone else now. It's like pretty much brokers are saying, this is what we've got. Here's a list, buy them based on what I'm giving you a list on, rather than, oh, can I get a sample? Like, no, there's no time to get samples. Once upon a time, I used to get samples from me, and he would send me samples and say, oh, what do you think of these? And I would get to choose how much I purchased based on what the samples were like. These days, that's not, I'm lucky if I get samples at all. And if I do, I still have to order them just purely on spec, rather than, I just know, though, I trust Ian. And I guess that's what happens, is you build up enough of a reputation and enough trust in who you're dealing with as an independent bottler and also an importer of independent bottlings, that you trust what's going on. At the end of the day, he's not putting his label on something that you just tip down the drain. I mean, I'm sure there's some people who have said, I didn't really like that, but you're always going to find whiskies you don't like for your palate. But yeah, what's Mark saying? Yeah, range of ABVs in North Star is huge. They are, yeah, for varying reasons. But what do people think of that, Speyside? Nice way to start. Yep.
Yeah, I liked it on the palate. I thought, yeah, it was a really nice one to start off with. Plenty of flavour. Yeah, like you said, the finish isn't huge. It isn't, yeah, like it isn't a huge long finish on it. But again, somebody else is saying very like Glenfarclas than Glenallachie. So it's good to have that conversation of, what is it? But obviously the link to Edrington is maybe a bit of a giveaway.
Yeah.
But I find it very easy drinking, but still a lot of flavour.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. I mean, for an indie bottling of, with a 10-year age on it and tasty, I think it's a great sort of, it's a sort of whiskey you can pull out and you're not going to offend anybody. You can just pull that out at the house and, light style. Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's that. just so that everybody knows, we will have these on sale tonight. We mistakenly put a newsletter out at around 6:15, and the website's a little busy at the moment. So I'm going to wait until maybe the second last whiskey or the last whiskey, and I'll put all the North Stars on at once and let you know, so that you've got sort of first access to them, because there isn't a lot of them. So if you like one, you're going to have to jump on pretty quickly. But I'll leave them to sort of more the end of the tasting. But this one here will retail for around $129 a bottle. So I thought that was really, really reasonable, really great for an independent bottling as well.
Moving on to the next whiskey, this whiskey, and this is one of the things I love about Ian and North Star. This whiskey surprised me, like really surprised me. I mean, Glasgow is one of those distilleries that I found that I'm still not sure what they want to be when they grow up. You know, and they're still young. I've had a bit of their core range, and I've sort of been, yeah, you know, I'm just not certain. Thanks, Craig. Yeah, I haven't been sure about them. And Ian bottled a Glasgow for his 5-year birthday. And I think it was a bit of a vanity project. You know, he's been friends with the Glasgow guys behind Glasgow Distillery since the beginning. They kind of all started at the same time. It was a 5-year-old bottling for his 5-year birthday from a Glasgow distillery. He's from Glasgow. He had a famous whiskey label artist do a particular style of label, and it was a sherry cask Glasgow. And I don't know, it didn't do it for me. And I've had a few people say the same thing. I mean, not that it was bad, I just wasn't sure about it. So when I saw this one coming out, I was like, oh, okay, you know, Glasgow. And we did a tasting the other night, and we started off with this whiskey, and I just thought it was fantastic. I mean, you know, it's a young whiskey in a out of a refill barrel, you know, at 51.5% or something. Was it 51.5%? And if a whiskey is going to get caught out, it's when it's young and in a refill barrel. You know, like as in if the spirit has got, you know, flaws in it, or it's not, you know, up to scratch, or it doesn't sort of represent itself well, coming out of a refill barrel at a young age is really gonna show that. But I just thought this whiskey on the nose just belied its age. You know, it really showed some lovely maturity about it. You know, sort of almost more of a space ID type nose to me. And yeah, really caught me by surprise, because I just wasn't expecting it. And that's, you know, I guess one of the fabulous things about independent bottlers is that they can showcase a distillery sometimes in a better way than the distillery does themselves. You know, whereas a core range sometimes, I guess, just hasn't found its groove yet. You know, this was so distilled in January 2016, bottled from a refill barrel, one of 278 bottles, 51.5%. So Ian's tasting notes are on the nose, buttered digestives and vanilla pods, palate, very creamy, easy floral taste, which works well with the refill wood, and finish, burnt orange slices and light spice. And yeah, I just thought, you know, for a 5-year-old and out of a distillery that I haven't really paid much attention to yet, I just thought, oh, okay, maybe there's a bit more going on at Glasgow than I'd first imagined. But has anyone else had much in the way of Glasgow distillery whiskey? No. It's yeah, I mean, their core range is obviously on sale in Australia, but I haven't had anyone sort of really say, oh, you should go and look at this. And the only, apart from the core ranges, the only indies I've had have been the two from North Star. So Their OBs have just changed from 500 to 700. Okay, yeah. What do people think of that? I mean, is there enjoyment? I think it's once if you've had it in the glass for a while, it's one of those ones, especially that as you come back to, as we go through the tasting, leave a bit in your glass, come back to it, and I think it just really starts to open up. And I just love the sort of beautiful sort of pears and apples, and that's me also. I mean, I'm a great lover of bourbon cask over sherry cask. I love when spirit gets to shine.
I think, Scott, as well, it'd be really interesting to know about Glasgow and what their fermentation's like, because Glencairn distillery has a really long fermentation and it really gets a lot of those fruity notes out. So it'd be interesting to see what Glasgow are doing to get that in their spirit, because they've been winning an awful lot of awards for what they've produced so far. And like somebody said, age is the problem, but to win so many awards is fantastic. So it must be all about that fermentation and the spirit to be able to get that spirit up to that grade so quickly. Because it's very drinkable, this, it's not like you really need to leave it for a very, very long time. And we're talking 5 years. It'll be very interesting what this is going to be like after 10, 15 years.
It's I guess like a lot of those younger distilleries that are, releasing their whiskey young, and you're probably having to do that longer fermentation is really important as a part of releasing young, because you really need that spirit to be fruity and to be able to come up to good flavor early on in its life. But I don't know enough about them.
Yeah, I think it's really good though that they're not, like, a lot of these distilleries are bringing them out, like you said, bringing them out young, and it's good because we get to recognize the spirit, whereas I think a lot of people who are just new into the whiskey industry and drinking whiskey tend to go in and it's just about flavor. And then you find that in Europe at the moment, there's more and more whiskey or independently bottled whiskey being bought because it tastes like the distillery. And people are getting more involved in that now of, I want to taste the Glenlivet spirit. And I'll know if it's a good Glenlivet, if it's got that real Glenlivet spirit in there, and like Glencairn and, so on and so forth. It's not just about the cask, it's about the spirit and whether the casks complemented it. And I think these guys are doing a great job of that, complementing the spirit, so it's,
it's like the, obviously he's dead now, but Jim Swan, he's left an indelible mark on the industry because of that formula he had for getting young whiskey into bottles early, and being tasty enough for the market to accept it and to be able to start selling it. And, long fermentations and then a formula barrel program basically. So there's some sort of some enjoyment, some maybe a bit young still. I think this is definitely one to come back to in the glass, as we sort of get through the. You'll notice this one's in a frosted bottle. Ian's he's not one to spend money on his packaging, but the frosted bottle was always about his premium products. But he has suffered the current issue that many companies are suffering, and that's supply of bottles, labels, you name it. And hopefully not, but I fear that there's going to be a barley issue coming down the line soon, for obvious reasons, but or maybe not so obvious reasons, but one of the, I think they're saying at the moment, because of the war in the Ukraine, there's going to be a 35%, a minimum 35% price increase on barley in Europe, and I don't know what it's going to do to the supply of barley, but Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so Ian's frosted bottles, he's had to start using them just for anything because that's all he had left. And so all these people that were getting their, 21-year-old Springbanks and 25-year-old Longrows in their beautiful frosted bottles, and now you can buy your $130 10-year-old Secret Speyside in a frosted bottle. All right, moving along to speaking of secrets, to the Secret Highland, which may or may not be one of my favourite distilleries that I never used to think much about, but it was North Star that actually got me spending a lot of time looking into this distillery, and that maybe it's this distillery, maybe it's not, but it's a Secret Highland, a 13-year-old, distilled in 2007, bottled from a first fill Oloroso butt, one of 330 bottles, only 42.9% on this one. Again, no idea why, just is. But his nose is this is some classic Ian Croucher notes here. Nose, rubber, sherry, dried fruits and toffee. He loves rubber, and I don't know why, but he mentions it a lot in his tasting notes. On the palate, raspberry, chocolate, waxy with some smoke, and then finish, warm tarmac, which is another favourite note of his. Warm tarmac, licorice, clean and fruity. I love this Highland. I think this is a great whiskey. This is even though it's the lowest ABV of these whiskies, it's super tasty. There's quite a bit going on there. And when I if you think Edrington again, I don't know how long he'd had this cask for, but one of Edrington's distilleries they sold about 2 years ago to a company that makes bottles for Macallan, and that distillery. Have I given enough hints yet? No one. Anyone care to guess? Oh, that's about 92.3% correct. I just love this distillery. I just think that the peated spirit that they were running, their peated whiskies, the single cask stuff that was coming through down the line in IBs for a while there was just, I thought, spectacular. I just loved it. I couldn't get enough of it at one stage. I just thought this is just the beautiful, their spirit and the peat, the Highland peat that they use was just this beautiful marriage of sweet peat. And, anyway, I fell in love with the distillery because of that. And ever since I've really loved Glen Turret's. And this is another one where I can't say I've had, I was lucky enough to drink one very old cask or bottle of Glen Turret that was all sherry maturation. When does everyone know? Anyone? I guess if you've ever went to Whisky and Almond for years, the bar manager there, James Fairley, who ran the bar, and some of you would know James, but he was the grandson and son of the Fairleys, who owned and operated and then sold Glen Turret for years. So he used to regale us of great stories about growing up in the distillery, and then when he finished up at Whisky and Almond, he cracked open this bottle that had been gifted to him many years earlier. That was, I can't remember the anyway. It was just spectacular. It was an unbelievable bottle of Glen Turret. But it was just because Glen Turret was primarily it's all about famous grouse. That was their reason for being. but there's such a wonderful history behind Glenturret, and you know, we never used to see the peated product by itself because that was made for the black grouse, which was a travel retail product, as I understand it, which we never used to see here in Australia. So if you've never tried a peated Glenturret before, try and find one. I've no idea where there would be one. Do you see them, Simon, around at all? No. Yeah, it was like there was this period there for a while of 2 or 3 years where indie bottlers had so many barrels. It was just coming everywhere from left, right, and centre. The Ruad Moor, RUADHMOHR or something. But yeah, I haven't seen any around for a long time. But yeah, fabulous. Yeah, a bit more ABV. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it would have been lovely with a bit more ABV, but again, a really well priced, lovely drinker. Secret Highland. Yeah, I will ask him also. 42.9. Why? How? He may tell me the same thing he's told me before, that he doesn't know. That's just how he bought it on spec. But yeah, lovely, enjoyable, good whiskey. Yeah, Cooper's Choy. Have they? Right, in recent times. Yeah, must look out for them.
Yeah, there was a cracker as well from Infrequent Flyers. They did one, a 10-year-old, I think it was. I think that was the last batch they brought out, and they had one. It was terrific.
Yeah. Does Ian source many of the barrels? How do you mean, does he source them? He sources them all, but in what way do you mean? Like directly from the distillery or just via brokers? I mean, his sourcing is various methods, as it is for all the indies. Of finishing barrels. Yes. Yep, he does. The same as all of them. All indie bottlers, well, I shouldn't say all, some indie bottlers, especially the ones where you're saying really, high-end bottled whiskies, they're just buying ridiculously priced barrels that, and then charging accordingly for them. But Ian's still in the business of trying to present, where possible, affordable whiskey to his customers. It's the difference, I guess, between a bottler who is literally only bottling, the casks as they can find them, like crazy old Speyside or Lefroy's or, Springbanks or things like that, where they just wait until that one special one comes along. Whereas Ian he's got a global business that he's trying to feed and grow, and so he needs to have a big volume of whiskey constantly on hand or coming through in the process. So he has PX barrels, Oloroso barrels. He was the first company to release a mezcal finished whiskey. So he did a Blair Athol, that was in series 15-16. It was just purely by chance that he had this cask, Blair Athol, that it was in a mezcal cask that the SWA hadn't actually approved use of those at one point, and he just happened to have one ready to go when they said, oh, by the way, you can do this now. And so he quickly bottled it and released that to the market. So mezcal, he's got some wine casks. What else is he? Look, sherry is his preferred finishing barrels. At one stage, he did an amazing thing, and I wish he'd do more, that will come through at some point. And that was, he started doing the reverse, and he was finishing PX and Oloroso in ex-whiskey casks, So the Oloroso and PX that he was buying over in barrels, and he was getting it, emptying it out into other barrels empty barrels that he had. Like I think the first one he ever had was he had Kalila barrels, which he emptied his PX into, and then he used the PX barrel to finish some whiskies. And then one day he went to empty the PX out of the Kalila barrel and just went, oh, wow, geez, that's amazing. He sent me a sample and I just said, oh my God, that I don't know if anyone's had it, but it was absolutely unbelievable. It was just like this magnificent, bacon, the maple bacon thing that you just wanted to pour over ice cream and just glug, and it was fantastic. Anyway, I got everything I could possibly get off him, and then I forced him to do it about another 2 times because it just grew this cult following here in Australia. And anyway, then he told me he's not doing it anymore because he's not making any money, and he was only doing it to make me happy, which I don't know if I believe that truly, but yeah, the fortifiers were great. They were just so good. So yeah, so he does use finishing barrels, because the truth is that with indie bottlers, sometimes the whiskies they buy it's just not ready to sell to people, and they need something to lift them up a bit, or to maybe soften them off a bit. And I think any bottler who says they don't do that, any of the big bottlers, you got a bottle of the El Miguelito rum, he must have a whiskey finishing in that barrel. Yeah, the El Miguelito rum was, I'll tell you that story in a second when we'll move on to the Aaron. But you should talk about Aaron, Craig.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Know everything I need to know about Aaron at the moment. It would be good to get back there though. I was on the phone actually to some friends back in the UK on the weekend there, and they said due to being here for 3 years and not going back home, you're starting to sound Australian now. I was like, what? I need to get back quickly. Obviously, young distillery, but starting to hit its mark now. I mean, it's providing 25-year-old whiskey, and what was it? The actual stocks at Aaron are extremely low. Most of the stock was kept over at Springbank in Campbelltown for many years, the first 5 or 6 years, and then the island of Aaron, the council, the Ayrshire Council wouldn't allow them to mature on the island, mature the barrels on the island, and then it wasn't until 5 or 6 years in that they were allowed to do it. And they stuck some barrels there, but never big enough warehouses to really store everything. But they do have warehouses now down at Lag, their new peated whiskey distillery in the south of the island, who have just released their first whiskey 3 days ago. So it'll be quite interesting to taste that. But most of the casks from Aaron are actually held at Bladnoch. So held down near the lowlands of Scotland. And I think that's when they started to get moved down there. The Aaron started to sort of produce more casks that they could sell to independently bottled. So it was it was a sort of time where you could go and pick some barrels from what they had. So some of the barrels I think had been at Springbank maturing, but in a rack warehouse, not in a dunnage warehouse. That was I think especially made for Aaron. But yeah, I mean, Aaron's all about this fruity, this citrus, and this spice, and all combining and really getting balanced there. So what does it say on the side of the bottle for this one?
Distilled in October 2012, bottled from a refill barrel, and then finished in an Oloroso barrique. So Ian's finished this. One of 210 bottles. On the nose, toasted white bread and salted toffee butter. On the palate, caramelized pecans, molasses and white coffee. And the finish, fresh fruit and some lemon marmalade. 51.8%. I reckon that's
higher ABV is, yeah.
Yeah, it's delicious.
Mm.
Yeah. I think it's got a nice balance going on. It's integrated well. You know, I mean, you got to be careful if you're doing finishing. Obviously, if you're over finishing something that should be reasonably good already, you could totally stuff it up, and you don't want to do that. But I think he's done well with this finish, and it's got a nice balance to it, sort of integrated well.
Definitely, I think so. I think like Aaron's the same. A lot of the stuff has been matured in bourbon and sherry barrels, and then obviously it's combined for like the Aaron 10 and a lot of the age statement Aarons. And I think it's done well here. I think just being in a one barrel and then being transferred and being sort of given a bit of life in another barrel is what Aaron needs, particularly at 9 years. And I think Ian's done spectacularly well with it. Great.
Yeah. Yeah, that was it's been tasty, and it's getting harder to get. Aaron, is it, Craig?
So it's just hard to get anything here.
Yeah.
Shipping's difficult, but new Aaron arrives in 3 weeks, but things like the Aaron 18, such limited amount. We only got 50 cases for the whole country, and I think currently we've got 2,500 people looking for a bottle.
Wow.
So we are just at the point where, we're obviously not going to be able to supply that, and the price have gone up significantly for things like the 18 because they don't have a lot of it. They're trying to push the stuff to 21 to 25 years now. So you're probably looking at 21, 25 years as a better option, more affordable option now for Aaron, because that Aaron 18 stock's just hard to get. The stuff under that 10 years old though, like this, bit more, bit easier to get. But these independent bottlings, I think a lot of them, or anything that's coming out, will be 10 and below, because they have an abundance of it at the moment. It's just basically getting it bottled, getting it labeled, and getting on a ship at the moment. It's difficult.
Yeah. I mean, they're nearly 30 years old, aren't they now, Aaron? They must be coming up.
Yeah, well, 95. So yeah.
20s,
yeah, close to it.
Yeah, I mean, in Ian's first series, he had a 20-year-old Aaron. I don't know if you ever remember that, but 6 years ago, he was a 20-year-old Aaron that was in his, trying to land with a splash in his first series. But that's great. I really enjoyed the Aaron.
Definitely. Yeah, and I like the color on it as well. I actually like that. Yeah, it's not super dark. I always find that you get super dark whiskies, and as much as a lot of people chase them, it really doesn't say much for how they've integrated spirit and barrel, etc., and how they've looked after it. Where you find a whiskey like that, and it's in this beautiful, like kind of sherryness to it, but it's not full sherry, and it's still got, you can see through the bottle, and there's a bit of golden color in there, and it's like, they've obviously really been playing about with trying to get the flavor right, and the color is just looks beautiful. So I think that ticks all the boxes.
Pineapple lumps. They're tasty. I like pineapple lumps. Yeah, they do chocolate coated pineapple lumps as well. If they don't, they should. So moving on to the Glen Grant, which I mean, the classic idea is that you put the oldest whiskey last and what have you. And someone the other day said, we'll do the Glenallachie and then the Glen Grant. I said, no, we've got to go by what's going to happen to people's palates. And I think if we had to put the Glenallachie next and then the Glen Grant, some of the Glen Grant would end up getting lost on you, because it's it's a beautiful, elegant Speyside, and So has anyone seen the mini movie on Dennis Malcolm, A Life in Whisky? No? Anyone? I asked people the other night if anyone's seen it, and they was like, no, I've never heard of it. It's like, it's a fabulous little mini movie that Campari had done in honour of Dennis Malcolm and his life at Glen Grant. I mean, he left Glen Grant for a little bit. I think he started there when he was 10, didn't he? Was it 10 years of age or something? You know, and his father had worked there and his grandfather had worked there. And I thought it was a great little movie. I mean, some people said that put them to sleep after 10 minutes, but it only goes for half an hour. I think it's great. It's just a great little story about his life and how he was with the distillery from, you know, the early days where everything was done by hand, and how he helped the distillery come through mechanization and automation, so when this came out in this series, I was pleasantly surprised, because to be honest, I can't say it, I drink a lot of Glen Grant. So yeah, this was a pleasant bottling to get to open up. It's the you know, Ian you know, I love when Ian does a release, he's usually trying to do everything, provide whiskies that anyone can afford at, you know, $130, $120, $130, and then mid-range stuff that will challenge people a little bit, you know, like the Glasgow. I think for me, you know, as I said earlier, I said that was just such a surprise, and I just was expecting nothing. And I don't know if you go back to it now, if you've still got some there, and have a look at that, you know, and then he'll drop one in like the Glen Grant, which is, you know, it's not, once again, I mean, some bottlers to do a 23-year-old Glen Grant, it would be way more expensive than this. So it's a, you know, entirely affordable, delicious single cask of Glen Grant, distilled in 1998, bottled from a refill hogshead. On here, this is this is Ian tasting notes now. 1 of 272 bottles on the nose. Redolently Speyside with old Chesterfield leather. On the palate, white chocolate buttons, grassy and earthy. Finish, longevous and dignified. You know, he must sit there with a thesaurus, because I'm sure longevous isn't in his vocabulary normally, and neither is redolently on the nose. But that's Ian. But yeah, I love this. This is you know, easy drinking whiskey. It's good whiskey. It's fantastic whiskey. It's something to sit there and really engage with. It really reminds me of sort of, you know, that older school style of Speyside whiskey. It does have that sense of sort of older age about it, or, you know, ye oldie whiskey world about it. Yeah, the Glasgow, the total. Yeah, there you go, total fruit bomb. It was interesting because in the end, on the nose, I was just the Glasgow and the Glen Grant. I was just like, oh wow, you know, it was a real little tennis match between the noses. I mean, on the palate, that tells a different story, but yeah, the fruits coming out of that Glasgow, yeah, really stood up against a 23-year-old Glen Grant, I thought, on the nose. But yeah, who's drunk a bit of Glen Grant here? Who can talk about it with authority? No. Does everyone agree with the tasting notes? I think they're...
There's no rubber. I'm disappointed.
No rubber. No rubber and no wet tarmac. Getting the leather Chesterfield now. Yeah. In the mini movie, when Dennis is off walking through the gardens of Glen Grant, and it's like this beautiful, you know, gardens with the river running through it, and a wooden stone bridge, and then there's this little sitting spot, like a little sort of stone, almost sort of bus stop sort of thing, and inside there is like a little locked cabinet. And then he's got a few bottles of whiskey stashed away in there. He carries the keys to it. And that's where he goes to sit and think. And I just thought, there was just something about, how, whiskey and moments and experience and all that sort of thing, they all conspire to give you a sense of something. And me drinking this whiskey made me think of that, that going to sit in an old garden of an old distillery in a little stone sitting space and drinking whiskey in that next to the creek and all the rest of it. And it's one of the things I love about whiskey, and that's what Ian's tasting notes are quite often dictated more by his experiences than by his memories, the memories that it creates or brings up. He connects with memories rather than making his tasting notes about the specific whiskey at that moment. He had a girl working with him, young lady Kira, for a while, and her tasting notes were far more elegant and very, interesting about the whiskey here and now. Whereas Ian, it was very different, and he was sort of drawing. He always draws upon his memories of stuff. Hence the reason, tarmac and rubber, and wet tarmac and rubber, and old leather chairs, and things to do with his childhood, like whether it be biscuits or sweets and all that sort of thing. But do Signatory have Glen Grants? When was the last time you had a Glen Grant with Signatory?
More older Glen Grants now.
Older.
Being produced. So obviously getting barrels of sort of an older age from Glen Grant. Not as many young barrels now.
See you, Simon. Thanks, mate. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Speak soon. Thanks for coming. And then the sherry bomb, the Glenallachie. This is, you look at the colour of this. This is what the sherry lovers love. They love that colour, that depth of. This was distilled before, put in a cask before Billy Walker had anything to do with the distillery. But this is obviously one of the reasons why Billy Walker saw so much potential in the distillery. Something that had potential things going on for it that just weren't being recognised by the owners. Obviously this is a sort of whiskey that he's starting to become, or not starting to, but now the Glenallachie lovers, this is what they're chasing. Big sherry bomb stuff. It's this is bottled from a first fill Oloroso butt, distilled in 2008. One of 690 bottles. Billy Walker walks on water. Yeah, everything he touches. What a fantastic cask. 13 years old, 690 bottles out of it. Must have been tight as, but a beautiful cask because it's given off so much colour and flavour. And then on the nose, dark chocolate, dried grape stems. On the palate, immediate Oloroso rush, coated with toffee chews and treacle, and then finish long, dry, chocolate-covered shortbread. This is what it. This does what it says it's supposed to do.
I find it quite creamy on the nose. Like actually, that dark chocolate's more of a milk chocolate.
More of a milk chocolate.
Yeah, I sort of think so. Some people might think maybe that's just the first sort of initial dive in on it. Yeah. So one thing I need to start doing, I think, is sniffing grape stems. There seems to be an awful lot of tasting notes which are like grapes and grape stems and grape leaves and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I can't say I know what grape stems smell like either, to be honest. But even dried grape stems. Maybe what you've got to do is go and buy a packet of the raisins and pick all the stems out of the ends of the raisins until you get a handful,
and then smell them.
Smell those.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. They don't smell much. There's in Scotland. There's a winery in Scotland, and the review on the winery by one of the top wine guys in Europe is never go there. Worst wine I've ever tasted in my life. And then they go on about talking about how terrible it is, and it's now one of the most visited wineries in Europe. Everybody wants to taste how bad it is.
Not all, yeah. Not all reviews are bad. Not all bad reviews are bad. Yeah. For me personally, I'm not a huge sherry cask whiskey drinker / lover. That's me personally. My palate prefers bourbon cask. And that sort of thing, but for me, this is, I guess this is, I think someone said Edward Dower-ish in that respect. It's sort of, I guess it follows that sort of style of heavily influenced sherry cask whiskey. Yeah, what's anybody else's thoughts of it? Yeah. I mean, look, my personal thoughts probably follow that as well, but Scottish winery, yeah.
I think that I don't really know where Glenallachie, again, the spirit sits with Glenallachie, so
no,
I'm not really that sure where. Whether Billy Walker's still playing around with it, because he's obviously inherited a lot of spirit and he's going to try and do things to that spirit, and I'm not really sure what he's producing now himself. But there is some sort of a space-sideness to that whiskey, but with a big sherry, sherry.
Yeah.
10. Oh wow.
Yeah, okay. I don't know the batch 6, but look, I mean, I guess going back to the point of Ian and what he bottles and casks he does, he's this is just really is it's a North Star release as best he can do it. I mean, he's suffering the same issues that all the independent bottlers are. It's so hard to find casks that are reasonably priced that you can get out to the market. He can't supply the market enough. The demand for his products is so high now that he's releasing stuff overseas that we don't get here in Australia. Excuse me. And there's stuff that we're getting that aren't released overseas. He's just having to do that now. But what he's always aiming to do in what he releases is exactly what he's done here, is just to do something for everybody. And that Glenallachie is for the people who love the sherry bombs, and by all accounts, there's lots of them around. Lots of people loving the sherry bombs.
And they're getting harder to get as well. I mean,
harder to get.
Even recent imports of things like Adelphi and stuff like that, you're still not getting big, massive sherry bombs. There, a lot of the stuff's making sure it's quite balanced.
Yeah. I mean, I promised to sort of talk a bit about where Ian's headed to. I digressed a bit just to talk more about this release, but if you didn't already know, Ian announced just recently that he's building a distillery in Campbelltown, so Dalriata, just a week after the Rosé company announced that they were building a distillery in Campbelltown as well. I said to Ian, did that put your nose out of joint a little bit, having someone else announce it a week before you? He said, no, not at all. He said, we had been talking when we found out that both of us were planning to open a distillery in Campbelltown, because why should Springbank have all the fun? But I think Dalriata will be something else. Yeah, have a look at it online. The Dalriata, you can sign up to things, so you can follow its development. I think they've actually got planning permission already, as opposed to Rasay, I think, have bought the land, but they don't have the permission yet. You've got a bottle of the South Star already, have you, Mark? Are you saying I have got in a bottle? Oh, you have got in a bottle of, oh, I see, you've got in a bottle, brought a bottle in. Which one is it? The Speyside or the
I got in the Highland.
The Highland, okay, yep.
I had the choice of 3, and I thought, well, the Highland was probably the most likely to go for.
Yep.
But it seems strange it's taken so long for people to have now got onto the Campbelltown train when there's only ever been 2 or 3 distilleries in the actual location for forever.
Yes.
And now suddenly everyone's thinking to themselves, oh, let's go.
Yeah.
Man, if they'd have gone 4 years ago, man, they'd be printing cash, because what's the cost of a Springbank currently? I mean, you can't, I mean, Craig would know, when you put a Springbank order out, how long does it last? 28 seconds?
We just don't bother now. It's like, it's basically,
I got your email, I clicked on the link, boom, computer froze. So there you go. Well done.
They are they're doing some amazing things, and I guess it's all about as well that they're not bottling enough, and there's been label and bottling problems there as well. But in general, I mean, it is quite sought after. We actually we dabbled in whether putting on I guess a competition online for a Springbank. And when we did that, we did have a bit of research into it though, and we looked at like Australian pages, and they're in their thousands, for Springbank. But things like Glenlivet and Glenfiddich are in the millions of people following them. So it's still there's just not enough liquid to supply the people that really want it, particularly in Australia. It takes so long to get here as well. But we were lucky to get some in this last batch, but it's been pretty hard.
It's interesting. I mean, look, for Ian, he's not a big guy with lots of money, so he had to wait. It's obviously a conversation that he's been having probably over many whiskies for a period of time with. He's doing it with another guy, David Stirk, who used to be an independent bottler in Dumfries and Galloway, with a company called Creative Whisky Company. He used to bottle some outstanding whiskies. Oh, there you go. Yeah. So the South Stars, we've got them on the way here. So although I just received an email yesterday, but that's not unusual, saying your shipment has been delayed. so who knows where it is, but it's on the way. So yeah, we've got the Speyside. There you go. That's a cracking whiskey. That's just amazing. Amazing whiskey. I mean, it's interesting how things have changed in just 5 years, 5 or 6 years. I mean, it was nothing for Anne to be bottling 41-year-old, malts.
Exactly right. I've got all the Vegas.
Yeah.
20, 23, 22, 40, 41, 33, I think. It's absolutely bonkers what they go for an auction now. A 41-year-old Vega, I think at the last Scotch whisky auction went for £700.
1,300.
700.
700.
It's not quite.
Either way, that's
oh well, I got this for stupid money, like £260, but now it's tripled or nearly along those lines. It's crazy that high-end market. It's just Springbanks. You might as well just give all your firstborn should be just sold out.
Yeah. No, that's right. Creative Whisky Co. So David sold the company 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, something. I don't know. I just started to bring the product into Australia, and literally 3 months later, he said, "Oh, I've sold the business." I went, a couple of the Deanston Creative Whisky Co. bottles floating around retailers in Australia. Really? Wow.
Scoop them up.
Oh yeah. He bottled amazing whiskies, and again at really great prices. He was offered a price, money for his business. That whiskey, that Creative Whisky Glenkeith was unbelievable. My greatest disappointment with that whiskey was that David told me that he had a bunch sitting there that he put aside for me because I had an initial shipment, and then I said, David, I'd love some more. He said, okay, I've got a bit more here. I'll put it aside for you. When I asked him for it, he said it was gone. And that was, I could have cried. Yeah, that was just an unbelievable whiskey. Yeah, people still talking about it everywhere. Yeah, we haven't spoken since. I can tell you that I probably didn't speak to him after that. He had sold the business pretty quickly after that, and yeah, we didn't really speak again. But he's now working with Ian again, and then another guy, Ronnie Grant, who's a builder who is involved in the It's All About Springbank group. I don't know if anyone is a member of that group, but anyway, he's one of the guys who heads up that It's All About Springbank group. And so there's a bunch of guys, and they're raising money, and South Star is a brand that they've created as part of the cash generation program. So yeah, there's a Speyside, a Highland, and an Isla. And the Highland is what age is on that one? Can't remember. 10. Yeah, 10. I think the Speyside is 12-year-old, and the Isla is 8 years or something like that. But they'll retail for around 120 or something like that.
Is that a 700ml bottle as well? Looks huge.
700ml, 48%. Although by the time it gets here, I might have to put the prices up. I mean, by the time it gets here, we'll have a tax increase. The excise will go up, and if excise is going up at CPI is probably going to go up by how much next time? Something ridiculous.
That's why I bought it. I simply realised that if it did come in, it was already going to be priced up an extra $20 or $30. So
yeah,
I grabbed it while I could.
Yeah, good on you. Yeah. He just had it at the Limburg Festival, and apparently there was a lot of love for it. Yeah. Anyway, that's North Star. I hope people have enjoyed that lineup. It's it's good old honest North Star whiskey. There's something for everybody there. Yes, and I think Craig was going to put it up online. Did you get it up, Craig? Or
it's on.
It's on. There you go.
I've shared the link, so I'll share it again. Was it? They're all up and ready there. So I mean, there's not a lot of bottles there, but hopefully enough for the people that are on this tasting.
Yeah.
And what was it? Yeah, I mean,
Aaron's
the pick for me. Yeah, definitely good Aaron. I really enjoyed the Glen Grant. Actually, I thought that was a great whiskey.
Yeah.
I keep going back to that. So, but yeah, it's certainly a good pick. I always choose the expensive ones these days, or the more expensive of the lot. But no, it's been great. Really good independent bottlings again. He's doing such a good job. I mean, it's interesting to think that he started out, what was it, $200,000? Was it you said?
200,000 bottles.
Bottles, there you go. And I wonder how many he's got now, like in regards to liquid, and like how big that company is now. Like in what he's got floating around and what he needs to buy all the time, every time he bottles something. It's a big business now, I would imagine, and distillery of his own in such a beautiful part of Scotland. So yeah, so it'll be fantastic to go over there. But that's it. Somebody said Aaron, Glen Grant. So yeah, if you can stick your favourite in the chat there, let us know what you thought was your favourite. I'll let you know as well. We have Glengoyne tasting coming up pretty soon. I think that's on the 12th of May. There's also a gin tasting on the 4th of May, 40 spotted gin. If you're into a little bit of gin as well. And then at the end of the month, we've got Kinglake, which will be Kinglake. It will be a breakdown of the Kinglake bottling. So they only really have one single malt whiskey. We're going to break it down. We're going to go and look at the barley. We're going to go and look at the spirit. We're going to look at the spirit after a year, 2 years, cask strength, and then look at the final product. So real breakdown of Kinglake, and we'll have the guys from Kinglake on, and we'll also have the guys from Voyager barley as well, the Voyager malted barley as well, talking about how they malt and what they go through to produce the barley. And you'll actually have samples of the barley there to sample, to smell, and to start to understand where the flavors come from, etc. When they extract the sugars from it, they're going to tell us all about it, which will be quite exciting. Might be quite a long tasting, I think, but there's some good whiskies in there. So that should be up pretty shortly. Yeast samples, yeah, if we could do yeast samples, we would. I really wanted to bring it into your own home, so you weren't sort of visiting Kinglake, but I guess this gives you the option that if you're ever in Melbourne to drive all the way up to Kinglake and visit them, because I did go and visit them. The distillery itself is, it's basically a block of land in the middle of nowhere, and it's just a couple of sheds, and they've built basically the distillery within a couple of sheds. So yeah, it's pretty good to go and visit, and everything's off the land, and they're trying to do everything quite environmentally friendly. So it's a good one to look into, and we'll show you through the distillery as well, and let you sort of know what they're doing up there. But yeah, should be good tasting. Then in June we're going to go the Lakes, I think it's called. They just won World's Best Whiskey, so we're going to be joined by them in June, and we're also going to hopefully with Scott line up a Bimber tasting as well for June as well. So lots going on. It's yeah, I mean, Bimber is doing some amazing things. They are talking about whiskies that hit their heights after they've been released. I think Bimber is the one at the back of my mind all the time, is that they release a bottle, and within an hour of it being released, it's already on eBay or on an auction site going up in price. So sought after. So yeah, good, some good whiskies out there, but some really good tastings coming along. Whippersnapper in Perth have claimed World's Best Whiskey. How many are there? That's right, there you go. I don't know, is World's Best Whiskey probably at the San Francisco Awards and this award and that award and etc. The one thing you need to remember is that Cavalan Vino Barrique this year got platinum status, which means that it no longer needs to enter awards anymore to get a platinum status award. It's had 4 in a row, and they no longer need to send samples of it anywhere. They just automatically enter it in and give it a platinum status. So it's quite interesting. Scott, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Craig.
Been a wonderful tasting. I think out of all these, like I said, my favourite's been the Glen Grant, and we've got a few people in there saying the Highland, the Secret Orkney and the Secret Speyside were good, which I enjoy. These are really, like for me, really flavoursome, I guess more easy drinking whiskies, but lots and lots of flavour in there. And yeah, it's a great lineup. It's really actually hard to choose because they're all quite different. But I mean, that Glasgow as well, we've got to keep a good eye on that Glasgow, because they're going to be producing exceptional stuff in the future. But yeah, fantastic. Thanks to everybody again for coming on.
Thanks a lot. We'll do it again next release.
Excellent. Thank you. Jump on the link, grab some North Star, and we'll get out to you tomorrow. Everything's in stock at the moment, so we should be able to get it to you as quickly as possible. Thank you very much, and we'll leave it there, and we'll end the tasting. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks
Scott.
Cheers. Bye. Yes.